Hey, this video is for parents or caregivers who are in the process, they're contemplating, they're thinking about, should I get my child an IEP and you live in the state of Florida? This video is for you. I just want to break down some of the myths or the ideas behind getting an IEP, the rationale for why, or maybe why you shouldn't get one, and then just knowing the basic process of how to get one. So the first thing I want to go over is that an IEP is not the end all be all when it comes to education. Some myths behind that is, oh, once my child has an IEP, their test scores are going to go up, or their reading score is going to go up. They're going to be able to do ABC. That's not necessarily the case. It's not a magic wand or a permanent fix. There's still going to be a lot of work that has to be done. The only difference with getting a child an IEP versus not having an IEP is that now they have the opportunities for more resources. Resources are used to help them do better on their testing or do better in their learning in the classroom. But that's why I said it's not the end all be all, because what if a school does not have the necessary resources? You're going to be kind of stuck back to square one. So the first thing you want to do is definitely assess the environment. Assess, is this the best environment for my child? Should they stay in public school? Maybe they'll do better at a charter school or a public school. Maybe if I have the resources, I can homeschool. So you want to just make sure that it is the best environment for your child. The second thing is with getting an IEP, the reason why it's so hard to get one, because that's a tough label to put on a child. You're pretty much saying my child is so disabled that they need resources in order to function in their academic setting. So you want to be very mindful about doing that. I think sometimes, or a myth or an experience that happens, sometimes parents get IEP happy. Oh, I want this, I want that. And it just doesn't necessarily look the best when it comes for your child. So if they don't need one, try to avoid getting one. And sometimes it may not be that they need an IEP. Sometimes they may just need a 504. They might just need a few accommodations to help them with their learning. Or maybe they just need some tutoring. So try to look at, they'll even say on IEP, the least restrictive environment. You want to do the most simple things first and try to rule that out before taking such a big step and getting that legal document. Another thing too, it kind of goes back to assessing the environment. Like maybe your child isn't doing so well, but what are some other factors that could be adding to that? Is it the classroom? Maybe the teacher's style of teaching and your child's style of learning isn't the best. Maybe you just need a classroom change, a new teacher, or like I said, a new school, a new environment that could help. Another thing that you might want to consider is just like at home. What's happening at home? Is there chaos at home? Or does your child have a structured environment? Is it predictable? Do they know what to expect when they get home? Are they sleeping good at night? Or what are they eating? Are they spending too much time in electronics? Like you want to be able to rule out all of those things first before you say, okay, I think my child is disabled and needs an IEP. After you rule all of that out, the next step is to request a meeting. You want to request a meeting with either the school counselor, or if the school has resources, maybe if they have like an ESC specialist, or they may have like a MTSS coordinator, you want to reach out to them and see about scheduling a meeting. Maybe you don't have their direct information, so reach out to the teacher. The teacher is usually the best advocate to see, do we need to take another step. Another thing about reaching out to the teacher, you definitely want to make sure that you and the teacher are on the same page before requesting an IEP. Here's why. An IEP goes off data. There has to be enough data to show and prove that your child has a deficit. And the deficit has to be, has to have a gap. So pretty much what I mean by that is an IEP goes off, okay, let's say your child's in first grade, right? All the first graders in the grade for that school or even for that district. Let's say they're performing here. They're all performing at like 70% when it comes to test scores. Maybe they're using iReady and they're basing it off that percentile. Well, your child is here. They're at 35 percentile. That is a gap, right? So they look at how big is the gap to determine if that data is sufficient to see, does this child need to be evaluated. Another thing that is looked at besides test scores is like assessments that the teacher does in the classroom. So that's why it's really important that you guys are on the same page. Maybe let's say we're going back to first grade, a standard or an assessment that they're covering is knowing their phonics and knowing their sight words. Like, let's say if all the kids in the class, they're on like page 3 of learning sight words and your child can barely get through column 1, that is a deficit, that is a gap. So you want to find and have supporting evidence that there is this gap so that you can move forward with an evaluation. And the best way to get that is to be in communication and collaboration with the teacher. So one way you can be proactive in this, I know most counties have parent-teacher conference nights, and that's usually towards the end of the quarter, and they evaluate and show you what your child has been working on. You as a parent, you can request to meet with a teacher before that. Maybe you don't want to wait till the end of first quarter, which is usually around October. That's a little too late. So maybe like school in Florida typically starts in August. Maybe by early September, you should be reaching out to the teacher. Hey, I want to know how my child's doing. And have that rapport and have that relationship, because once again, your child's teacher is going to be your best advocate, and they'll be able to speak to the things that they're seeing in the classroom, and they'll be able to collect the data that's needed. After you do that, then you can reach out to the other supporting personnel, like I said, a school counselor, the ESC specialist, admin, if you have a better contact with them, and request a meeting, request an evaluation meeting. This is very important. I have seen, based off my experience, parents may request a meeting, and there is a meeting, but nothing comes out of it because the meeting was not structured. The meeting did not have a topic of interest. If you're just kind of gathering just to kind of talk about things, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a meeting just to talk about things. But if you are seriously trying to get your child evaluated, you need to make sure that's said. You need to make sure that that is the topic that needs to be addressed. So the best way you can do that, most counties in the state of Florida, they use a system called PEER. And PEER generates a lot of the IEP documents, including a meeting notice. So as a parent, if you request a meeting, you are supposed to get a meeting notice, which lists the date, the time, it lists all the participants, and you have to sign it and show consent that yes, you would like to participate in this meeting. So you definitely want to make sure that you get that type of document, because that is more it's more promising that you guys are going to focus and discuss what needs to be discussed versus just like a regular, like, oh yeah, come on in at 2:30 on Monday. That means nothing's really gonna happen. So just kind of gauge how they're going about the documentation, because documentation is everything. Just like how it's everything with making sure that there isn't a gap or there is a gap with your child, it's the same thing on the other process of starting an evaluation. So once you get your meeting notice, you sign it. Remember, you can bring anyone you want to the meeting. You have that right as a parent. So if you want to bring an advocate, you can. If you just want to bring someone who's well versed in IEPs and stuff, you can do that. If you want to bring like the other parent or like the grandma, whatever, you have that choice. So remember that as well. So I like when parents bring in other people. I'm not saying bring the whole entourage, but maybe bring one or two people who also has your child's best interests at heart and they have some knowledge of what's happening. You definitely want someone who's knowledgeable and well spoken because that's going to help you make a little more progress in the evaluation versus, you bring someone who's like a hothead and they're screaming at everyone at the table. You're not going to get anywhere with that. So be very mindful of who you bring to the table. So once you do that and you sign that consent, you as a parent, you definitely want to make sure you know what you're talking about, especially if you are requesting the meeting. Sometimes the school requests a meeting. And usually when a school requests a meeting, that's pretty serious because that means that their data is showing the evidence that there's a gap and something needs to be done. And they need you as a parent on board. But I figure if you're watching this video, you're not that parent. You're the parent who's being proactive. So we'll get back to this topic. So once you are going to attend the meeting, you want to have knowledge about the suspected disability that you're thinking your child may have. And you can simply know that information by going on the Florida Department of Education. They have all the different disabilities listed out. They also have what are like the expectations to meet the criteria for the disability. They have the information on what evaluation should look like, the timeline, what should be collected, what should be conducted. It has literally all of that listed out on the Department of Education for the state of Florida. So you want to read that. You want to become well versed in it. If it's a little too hard to understand, ask a friend. You can ask a support person at the school, like the school counselor or the ESC specialist, MTSS coordinator. Can you please explain what this means? You have that right as a parent. Or you can find videos on YouTube like this video. I could definitely make like another video talking about the different disabilities and what they mean and kind of write it out on the board visually so you can see. So if that is something that you're interested in, like comment and let me know and I will move forward with that. So you want to know what kind of disability that you think your child may have. And it's going to be a suspected disability. They're not going to label your child disabled and give them an IEP until they conduct an evaluation. They look at all the data, they see if there's a gap. That's how they go about it. Okay, so let's say, for example, you feel like your child has SLD. SLD is a very popular IEP disability to have. SLD means specific learning disability. You think your child just struggles with learning, and that could be like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. The thing about the state of Florida, from my experience, they won't label your child with a very specific disability like the ones I just listed. They're just gonna give them a very general, broad thing of they're just learning disabled because they're not they do not have the resources to necessarily do that type of evaluation. If you want a very specific evaluation, you would have to go and see a psychologist who can do that evaluation for you, a private psychologist. The school psychologist, they are limited in their resources and what they can evaluate. Most of the times when a school psychologist does an evaluation, they're once again looking at the data that the teacher brought, looking at the gap, and maybe doing some additional testing, but it has to be within like the resources of what the school district allows. So sometimes they may do some academic testing, they may do maybe an IQ test, but it's not going to be specifically for the learning disability. So just know that if you want a very detailed, concrete answer with recommendations on how to help your child, you definitely need to seek a private evaluator. And once again, that comes down to what? Resources. Private evaluations cost money, and I'm pretty sure insurance does not cover it. So that's just something to be mindful of. But just know if you want the best answers, you want to get that. So let's say, staying on that topic, let's say you do get the private evaluation. Guess what? That doesn't mean that the school district is going to give you an IEP. They are not. They're going to take that evaluation and be like, okay, that's cool that you paid $500 to get this, but what does our data says? What does our teacher say? What does our gap say? So they're still going to do the whole evaluation process. So either way, you got to wait. You got to wait the 60 days or more, depending on how long you request the meeting, da da da. But you got to wait and really see it through. So be patient. Be patient and understand that, it's a process. It's a process with humans involved, so it's gonna take some time. There's gonna be some error, there's gonna be some mistakes, but that's just what to kind of know going in. All right. So let's say you don't have the money for the private evaluation, so you just stick with the regular school district evaluation. When you get to the meeting, right? Make sure you say all your concerns. Make sure that it's documented in the meeting notes. Every meeting should have meeting notes. Make sure that what you want to be evaluated is written in the meeting notes. Make sure that at the end of the meeting notes are reviewed with everyone, like they're read aloud, or you can privately say, I would like to read before signing. You want to make sure, because once your signature is on that and everyone else's signature on that, then they are bound by the law. It's a legal document to now do the following things. So you want to make sure that all of that is listed on there. After you sign the meeting notice, let's just stick with SLD. The team suspects, based off the data and the evidence, that the child may have a learning disability. So they're going to be evaluating them to see if they meet the program criteria based off the state of Florida for SLD. So you as the parent, once you know that, go back and review that handbook or review the website. Make sure that the criterias are being met to do the evaluation. I have seen in the past, right, where especially when it comes to SLD, that is a very tough IEP to get. I have seen in the past where the state of Florida usually requires some type of tiered intervention. That's usually called MTSS. And they usually require either a tier 2, but if you're looking at SLD, a tier 3 evaluation. And that is very hard to implement and do unless the child's already in tier 3 interventions. That's why, going back, make sure you and the teacher are on the same page, right? Because a lot of times I've seen where students do not meet eligibility for SLD simply because they weren't getting tier 3 interventions. So you want to make sure all of those things are in place already before signing, because you may sign and you get back to that table and they're like, oh, well, he seems like he may have a disability, but we don't have the intervention. And you're going to be really hurt. You're going to be really hurt and you're going to be really pissed. So just making sure that everything is being followed through, right? So once you get back to the table, they usually take about 60 days to do the evaluation. That is what the state of Florida requires. Like I said, it could be a little bit longer. Like, let's say the evaluation is completed, but they can't get a meeting until 2 weeks later because they already have XYZ amount of meetings. So it happens, right? Once you get to the table and they're going to review the results, usually the school psychologist is there, the teacher is there. There may be like an ESC teacher who could be taking on the child, has like their caseload because they're going to be implementing services. Just depends. Speech and OT typically aren't there unless you signed consent to get that. Now, here's the thing about speech and OT. Well, not necessarily speech, but more so OT. OT is a related service. You cannot say your child is disabled and need just occupational therapy. They won't do it that way. Not when it comes to public education. If you want OT done a certain way, you're going to have to pay money and get a private OT. But if you want it through the district, it has to be related services. And once again, they have to have a need, okay? And there has to be a gap or a deficit. They won't just give it to you just because it's a nice perk. Everything you want when it comes through the school district, you're going to have to make sure that you got the evidence to support it. So yeah, they'll review the results of the evaluation. Usually the school psychologist does that. And then, based off the evaluation and everyone's recommendations, then they'll decide whether your child is eligible based off how many certain criterias, or not eligible based off what criterias were not met. Once that is decided and everything sounds good and you sign off on it, then you have to have another meeting. Sometimes schools are amazing and they're able to do the eligibility meeting and the IEP draft meeting at the same day, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So when you go back to the meeting, remember it's only an eligibility meeting. They're gonna just let you know whether your child is eligible or ineligible. Then, based off if they're eligible, then you'll do a draft IEP meeting. And the reason why it's a draft is because they have to review it with you and you have to put your input on whether this service sounds good, or maybe you're thinking maybe you need to take that off, maybe you need to add that service. Then once you do all of that and you sign off on that, then you get the IEP. Now, what happens if you go to the meeting and your child is ineligible? You have a couple of things that you can do. You can request a reevaluation. You can, like I said, kind of going back to what I said in the beginning, look at the environment. Maybe it's not the best environment. Maybe they need a 504. Maybe they just need some tutoring just to kind of catch up. So you do have some other options. And it's not like the end, like you're ineligible for this disability. Like, let's say your child's ineligible for a specific learning disability. Well, maybe they would be eligible for a other health impairment because they have ADHD and you have a medical diagnosis that supports that. So there are other avenues towards getting an IEP. You just have to make sure it's what's best for your child. So those are all the tips you need to know about how to get an IEP when it comes to getting one for your child in the state of Florida. If this video was helpful, please give me a like. If you have more questions, I'll meet you in the comments. I'll respond to what I can. Or if you want to see something else, if you want me to expound on another type of thing, just let me know and I'll do it. Have a great day.